stories rise whispering, the echoes from the lone.
Welcome back, wanderers. We're stepping into a quieter kind of haunting. Not the kind that rattles chains or drifts through locked doors. And not the kind that dissolves with sunrise. No, this haunting has weight. It has teeth. And it has bone. Across England, tucked into manor houses, farmsteads and ancestral halls, there are skulls that are never buried. But not because they were forgotten. Because they refuse to be. These are the screaming skulls. Bone-bound spirits, domestic ghosts, guardians, or warnings, depending on who you ask. And we're going to sit with them, listen to them, and ask why England, of all places, became the land where the dead sometimes insist on staying indoors. So settle in. Light your lanterns. Let the house grow quiet around you. Because once you hear these stories, you may start to wonder what your own walls remember. In the quiet corners of England's stately homes, behind locked doors or nestled in attics, there are skulls that have outstayed their graves. They're not relics or curiosities, they're residents, and they behave like it. Screaming skulls are a strangely localised phenomenon. They appear almost exclusively in England, with documented cases emerging between the 16th and 18th centuries. Scotland, Wales, Ireland, lands rich with head cult lore, have no such tradition. It's as if something in the English imagination, or perhaps in the English soil, created the perfect conditions for this to take root. Some folklorists point to ancient Celtic beliefs. The head is the seat of the soul, the vessel of identity, the part of the body that remembers. Iron Age shrines have been found with curated skulls, and legends like Bran the Blessed speak of talking heads that continue to guard the land long after death. The screaming skulls don't offer prophecy. They don't speak wisdom, they scream when disturbed. They're not trying to guide you, they're just trying to stay. Perhaps the most famous screaming skull lives at Bettiscombe Manor in Dorset. The legend begins in the late 17th century with a West Indian servant brought to England. On his deathbed, the servant begged to be buried in his homeland, and Azariah Pinney refused. The man was buried in the local churchyard, and then the screaming began. Groans from the grave, windows rattling, visitors fleeing the churchyard in terror. Voices in empty rooms. Eventually, the body was exhumed and brought to the manor, and over time only the skull remained. Attempts to remove it, once thrown into a pond, for example, resulted in renewed disturbances. The skull was returned to the house, where it has remained silent ever since. But here's where that story fractures. In 1963, a pathologist examined the skull. But it was not the skull of a 17th century West Indian man. It was 3,000 to 4,000 years old, European, and female. So what happened? Was the legend invented to explain the skull's presence? Or did the skull adopt the story, absorbing the guilt, the injustice, the unease of the household that kept it? Folklore doesn't always answer. Sometimes it just stares back. Burton Agnes Hall, built during the reign of Elizabeth I, holds another of England's bone-bound spirits. 3 sisters lived there. One, Anne Griffith, was attacked and fatally wounded before the hall was completed. And on her deathbed, she asked that her head be kept in the house she loved. But her sisters refused. And after the hall was finished, the disturbances began. Moaning in empty corridors, footsteps pacing rooms that had never been slept in, and a sense of unrest that clung to the walls. Eventually, the family opened the vault, and Anne's skull had separated from her body. They brought it into the hall, and the disturbances ceased. But peace never lasts. A servant, irritated or frightened, threw the skull out. The horses panicked, the walls trembled, and the house itself recoiled. The skull was found and returned, and balance restored. Here the skull is not a curse, but a guardian, a domestic relic, a presence that insists on belonging. England has several more bone-bound spirits. Hunstead Farm in Derbyshire, a skull that screams when moved. Wardley Hall in Greater Manchester, believed to be Father Ambrose Barlow, a Catholic martyr, and attempts to bury it have led to hauntings. And Chiltern Cantello in Somerset, storms and screams whenever the skull is removed from the manor. Different counties, different centuries, same pattern. The skull must remain. In folklore, the head is sacred. It holds identity, memory, voice. And to preserve the skull is to preserve presence. So screaming skulls may reflect an ancestral guilt, the consequences of ignoring the dying, or a domestic haunting, the idea that homes remember and some spirits just refuse to leave. Or even protective magic. The skull is a talisman. They're not ghosts in the drifting, translucent sense of the word. They're bone-bound spirits, anchored, audible and unburied. A haunting with mass, a haunting that stays exactly where you put it, as long as you put it in the right place. Today, most screaming skulls are kept quietly. Some are hidden, some lost, some sit behind glass, mislabeled as curiosities. But stories persist. They remind us that folklore is not just about belief, it's about memory, ritual, consequence. And the screaming skull is a warning. Honour the dead, keep your promises, and never assume silence means peace. And so, my wayward souls, as we leave these bone-bound guardians behind, remember that some hauntings don't wander. Some hauntings wait, patient and persistent, listening for the sound of their own name. And if tonight's stories linger with you, if you find yourself glancing at the quiet corners of your home, you're not alone. Folklore has a way of settling in your bones. And if you enjoyed this descent into England's strangest domestic phenomenon, share the episode, leave a review, or whisper it to someone who loves a good folklore. Until next time, wanderers, keep those lanterns lit, stay curious, and stay haunted.